Yeah, okay, welcome. Hello everyone. Welcome to this event, which we've called Wellbeing in the New Normal. I'm very excited about this event because I think this is going to be the start of something new and important in the way agencies operate. And you'll hear much more about that later, but there are some significant things that we're going to expose and talk about during the next hour. So I'm Kemp, loud voice, today's host, former agency owner and now director of the Alliance of Independent Agencies. And one of the areas that I tend to look after is the people pillar. So all things talent in agencies, and clearly well-being is a very important part of that. And since our future leaders, next slide, Terry. So our future leaders, when we first talked to them, said there are some important issues that you guys need to think about, sustainability being one of them, but also well-being. Well-being in agencies, probably 2 or 3 years ago, was a very little talked about thing, but today it's such a big topic. And over the last 2 years, the Alliance have actually developed lots of ways in which we can support agencies and people in agencies develop and help build resilience and their well-being, develop good culture. And the number of ways of doing that, we've put a code of conduct together, which is very much people based. We have a wellbeing action group, and we're going to talk a bit more about that because this is the group that's responsible for everything you're going to hear tonight. We run a regular people pulse every quarter, and one of the questions in there is around wellbeing. We operate on a regular basis mental health training for our agencies, and one of the things in our code of conduct is that we ask every agency to pay attention to mental health first aiders. Every year we run a festival of happiness and interspersed with our other events. We are about to launch a podcast series on wellbeing, and particularly stories from people who have maybe suffered in the past but have pulled through, and sharing their own stories and tactics and how they came through it. We will hear more this evening about the Brilliant Creative Minds Code, which I think is a major step forward in helping, well, first of all, understanding the causes of stress and anxiety in agency client relationships and addressing that. And we're going to hear a great deal about that and the ways in which we can deploy tactics and things within our agencies. And of course, wellbeing research, which is one of the principal parts of this evening's discussion. So next slide, Terry. Let me introduce some of the people who will be participating over the next hour. Ruth Kieran. Ruth is CEO of Circle, an award-winning PR agency with 20 years experience of consumer and corporate reputation communications. Ruth is also an experienced crisis and issues expert, a seasons leader, and I know from working with her that she takes wellbeing in Circle, her agency, very seriously, and indeed has spoken about the Circle culture at several Alliance events. We are therefore also delighted that Ruth is co-chair of the Alliance and also heads up our people pillar. So welcome, Ruth.
Hi.
Stephanie Drakes is founder of Social and Local. In 2011, after 40 years, believe it or not, some don't, working at board level in the agency world, Steph set up Social and Local, a strategic communication agency. But she set it up as a community interest company with the intention of using its profits to fund and resource projects that benefit the world of advertising and communications. Her experiences had led her to believe that all was not well in the industry and that something needed to be done about its corporate and employee well-being. Well, Stephanie, congratulations, hats off, because what you're going to hear tonight is a major step forward, an initiative from Stephanie and her team. Sophie Holland is a research manager at Opinium. Sophie is passionate about mental health and holds a BA Honours in experimental psychology from the University of Oxford. She developed Opinium's workplace mental wellbeing audit, which we're going to hear about tonight, and heads up Opinium's mental health research team. Sophie also leads the internal wellbeing team at Opinion, and I know also for a fact that it's an award-winning agency for its client culture. She's heavily involved in the brand and communication space with a particular focus on health, wellness and social research. Alexandra, as she seems to want to call herself this evening, is Senior Marketing Manager at Crowd, an international full-service digital agency. Alex also heads up the Alliance Wellbeing Group, and as such has been the driving force behind this wellbeing research initiatives and the events program that will fall out of it. She is also passionate about wellbeing and doing all she can to improve the wellbeing of people who have chosen agency life for their careers. So welcome one and all. And I think that's enough from me, other than to say one last thing. When we do come into the, I've got the agenda to talk about. When we come into the panel piece, we really would like as many people as possible to turn their cameras on and participate. You'll get more from it if you engage in this conversation and you are with some people who have really put some work and effort into it and then can give you insights that might otherwise not be available. So this is how we're going to play the next hour. We're going to talk now about the research findings. We're then going to move into the Brilliant Creative Minds Code. And then we're going to have the panel discussions followed by some Q&A. So again, if you've got questions, store them up, put them in the chat room, be prepared to engage in what I hope will be a lively and interesting discussion on a really vitally important topic. So enough said from me. I'm going to hand over to Sophie to talk you through the research findings.
Thanks, Graham. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a few slides to show you guys. So you should all be able to see that now. Great, thanks a lot for the introduction, Graham. So to start off with, I'm going to run you guys through some of the research findings from our research that we ran back earlier this year. And we were delighted to partner with the Alliance on this. Our mental wellbeing as audit is something we developed in 2019. And we've been using it with clients, but with larger organisations to understand sector mental health and put forward recommendations to senior leaders in terms of what they can do to better support employee mental wellbeing. So I'm from Opinium. We're an insight agency based in London. Got offices in New York, very exciting. We opened them last year. Great timing with the pandemic. And yeah, excited to talk to you about this research. So to kick off with, I just wanted to talk about where kind of this came from, and why is Opinion talking about this? And it all stemmed from an idea, we all have mental health, and I think this is somewhat a more, well understood idea now. It's something we all have. It's not just mental ill health. Everybody has a level of mental health, just like they do physical health, and it's something we all need to, look after. And employers should play a part in supporting good mental health as well. And I came up with this idea that we should do some research at Opinium on this. So we have a marketing strategy that's all around, thought leadership and producing thought leadership reports on a whole host of different topic areas. So I propose we do something on mental health. It's a particular passion of mine, coming from an area where I have personal experience with this, with anxiety and depression. And I've struggled with that in the past and really wanted to kind of do some research for good in this space. So that's where it all comes from. So out of that, it was meant to be kind of a small piece of research, which has kind of stemmed and blossomed into this great offering that we now have, which is our mental wellbeing audit. And to talk a little bit more about that audit and that methodology, this is what it covers. So it's an online questionnaire. It takes about 10 minutes to fill out. And actually, some of you may have filled it out for us. So thank you very much. We start off with a scale called the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale. It's a academically validated scale about wellbeing, and from that we can derive a one-number score for wellbeing, which we can track across different cohorts and over time. What's really nice about this scale is it's quite positively worded. So what you'll find with a lot of academic measures that I've found in the past is they're quite negatively framed. This is very much about maintaining good mental health, not just the absence of mental ill health. And then we go on to ask about overall well-being. So not just well-being at work, it's any experiences of poor mental well-being over the last 12 months and also physical well-being and how that's impacted them at work. Then we go on to kind of mental health at work specifically. So talking about stress levels, sources of stress, but also are people talking to their employer about experiencing poor mental health? Why aren't they if they're not? And if they have, what reactions have they had and what's come out of that conversation? Then we go on to support at work, so different initiatives, and we're going to talk later on about some of the initiatives that are commonly offered by Marcoms agencies and what people think of those. And then also we ask people what would they like to see in the future, kind of thinking ahead, what else do they want to see their employer do to support them. And then finally, what we've added in for last year when we ran it, and we've also ran it again this year, the COVID-19 module, particular focus around working from home and the impact that that's having on people's mental health, and about returning to the office as well and what concerns people might have. So alongside our study that we ran with Alliance members, we also ran a study with UK workers overall. So throughout my presentation, you're going to see in places where we're comparing Marcoms agency scores against UK workers to understand where differences are there. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the findings, but just firstly, a big thank you to everybody who took part. We had 212 responses, which is amazing. And we couldn't have done it without people taking, 10, 15 minutes out their day and thinking about this questionnaire and filling it in. So thank you very much. And like I said, this took place March to April this year. So from the research and how I have structured this presentation is around our 4 key recommendations. So we had a lot of data, as you can see, we cover a lot in the questionnaire in 10, 15 minutes. And from that, we've distilled it down into 4 actionable recommendations for senior leaders in agencies to take forwards. So the first one is around focusing on workload management and tackling the issue of burnout. So as we'll see in a moment, burnout is quite a big thing in the industry, and some people feel that it's become quite normalized. And workload and heavy workload is feeding that stress, but it's also a key reason people aren't taking time off for their mental health. So it's a vicious cycle. So that's something we need to focus on tackling, and we'll discuss later on as well in the panel discussion. Also providing a safe space for sharing, but not just that, you need to then follow up with support. So we need to create a culture where people feel able to talk about their issues, that they're not going to be, demoted or not be given the same opportunities because they've opened up about experiencing poor mental health. But when they do open up, we need to give them some support around that. And lots of people spoke about that when we asked them questions in the open ends. And then also linked to support, introducing initiatives that are going to benefit people, but also facilitating those on open conversations. So these two are very intertwined, but there are particular initiatives that we see as having beneficial impact on mental well-being, and I'll go through some of those. But it's so important that we keep talking about this and normalizing, mental health. Everybody has it, because if we have all these great initiatives, but nobody is going to use them, if we have a culture where, you just got to knuckle down and not pay attention to your mental health, nobody's going to use those. And then finally, the last one's about reevaluating working practices after the pandemic. So as we all know, and we've experienced firsthand, working from home has been tough, and it's had some benefits as well. And we'll explore, what do people think about working from home? What are the benefits, and what are the challenges, and how can we kind of take the best of both worlds going forward, and potentially a hybrid model? So for our first recommendation about focusing on workload management and burnout, what we do see is that, okay, so everybody has experienced some form of poor mental health over the last 12 months. So 96% of people that we surveyed said that they'd experienced some form of poor mental health in the last 12 months. We detailed these on the right-hand side breakdown. So anyone who's experienced at least one of these in the last 12 months, that's 96%. So it's quite high. We do see this across a lot of our surveys. So that can be anything from feeling low or down, stress, anxiety, as you see on the right. But I think the particular differences I wanted to pull out is stress, that in the Marcoms sector, 78% have experienced stress in the last 12 months versus 42% of UK workers overall. It's a big difference. The second biggest difference there is exhaustion and burnout. So 52%, almost half of the people we spoke to, experienced burnout or exhaustion in the last 12 months, as 23% of the UK workers overall. There's clearly a big problem here that kind of needs addressing. And when we look then at stress, which is obviously another thing that's very interlinked with burnout, we see that Marcoms agency workers are rating their jobs more stressful than average UK workers. So we asked people to rate on a 10-point scale how stressed they felt about their job. And what we see is Marcoms workers give an average of 6, whereas UK workers an average of 5. And though that not seem much, it is quite a lot when we're looking at kind of averages here in these scales. And then what's really interesting, we look at the top sources of stress. Now, we can see that actually, as I mentioned and alluded to earlier, workload and having too much to do and an unmanageable workload, the top source of stress by quite some way. 59% of people citing that as a top source of stress, followed by impending deadlines and demands from clients. We'll talk about, relationships with clients later, and Stephanie's going to talk about that when we go through the code. Poor work-life balance being another source of stress. And then also, this element of imposter syndrome too, that's actually not commonly spoke about, not feeling good at your job. That's a third of us saying that actually that's a top source of stress for us at work. And I think what's even more concerning here with this one in particular is that we then see, again, there's a high propensity for people to experience poor mental health, 96%. When we look at that 96%, how many of them are actually taking time off for that, taking time off to rest and recover from work? Now, actually, it's only 13% of people. And that's compared to 32% of UK workers overall, so it's lower than the national average. And why is that? Why are we not taking time off for our mental health? So, half of people saying they felt that it wasn't bad enough for them to take a day off. I think one of the really worrying things is that lots of people saying it's actually because they just had too much to do at work. They couldn't prioritise their mental health because they felt they had too much to do. So 41% of people saying that. And I think these slides, I'm going to have a few of these. These are verbatim from the survey. We asked a lot of open ends, and I think this really brings to life what this issue is, and something we really need to tackle. This person's saying burnout is something somewhat accepted as normal in the industry, so it's something that needs to be denormalized. And also, this individual saying, actually, people need to take action much earlier to combat signs of stress. Employers need to take action earlier. And not just acknowledge that people are struggling and then just continue to apply pressure. So again, they need to offer that support to people. So the second recommendation is around providing a safe space for people to share and then following up with support off the back of that. So some really nice stats actually, and this is really promising, is that actually when we look at attitudes towards mental health in the workplace, we see that, Marcoms agencies compared to UK workers are more positive about their workplace and mental health than the average. So what we see here is the percentage of people who agreed with the statement shown on the left-hand side. And 87% of Marcoms workers are saying, actually, I feel like my colleagues would be supportive if I was struggling with my mental health, which is a lot higher than UK workers. And also people feeling that they can talk to their manager, that they can talk to their colleagues if they were worried about their mental health. But I think one thing to put out here is that, feeling this way doesn't always lead to action and actually opening up when you are experiencing poor mental health. And that's what we see on this slide. So 54% of those who experience poor mental health actually told somebody in their workplace about it. It is higher than UK workers, but that's still, 46% of people experiencing poor mental health that didn't speak to anybody at work about it, and when work could have maybe done something to help them. So what are the reasons for that? And we asked people, why didn't you, that 46%, we said, why didn't you talk to somebody at work about these issues that you're experiencing? So 69% didn't feel it was necessary to tell them. And I think, with this, I think it's also about, employers making clear how they can help employees, like what can they offer, what support networks are there. And it's again, going back to that, having some support in place for people when they do actually open up about their problems. And I think what's quite worrying is that we see a fifth here saying that they're worried about it jeopardizing their career if they were to talk about this, and people also feeling that they were embarrassed. So there's some issues here around stigma and normalizing this that need to be addressed as well. And again, with some quotes here from the survey, I think this really sums it up. This individual saying, it was ultimately pointless them talking to anyone at work because of bad culture, and that there was no HR or wellbeing program to support them, so it was pointless them to opening up. And another individual here saying, the person they spoke to was really sympathetic, but they couldn't help them, and so they had to take matters into their own hands. So our third recommendation is all around introducing initiatives and facilitating those open conversations around mental health. So in terms of the initiatives people are offered, we see remote working right up there. That's unsurprising now, because a lot of us are offered this, and I have been having to work remotely for the past year. Flexible working hours, actually also quite high up there, 60% saying that they're offered that at work. what I thought was really promising is that we see 48% of people saying they have a mental health first aider at their agency, and this is so good. I haven't seen stats this high for any of the surveys we've done. Usually this sits around 10%. So this is really great to see that we have ambassadors in our agencies who we can go and talk to, points of contact, who can be a triage service, and point people in the right direction of support. And when we look at specific initiatives, and the reason these are the only two shown is because of base sizes. So we had to split this out into those who were offered flexible working hours and space to take breaks. This slide is basically showing those wellbeing scores I was talking about earlier for those who have used flexible working hours and haven't used them, and then the same for space to take breaks. So this shows, the people who are using these initiatives, they have higher levels of wellbeing. So this is evidence to suggest that people who are accessing and using these types of schemes have improved mental well-being, and makes a case for agencies and organisations to start implementing these and encouraging use of them as well. And there is still demand for more initiatives. We asked people what they would like to see their employers introduce in their workplace from a pre-coded list here. The top one actually being monitoring of employee mental wellbeing via surveys, employee surveys. They want to give their views anonymously. 30% of people would like to see that. Again, flexible working hours up there, a quarter want to see that introduced in their workplace. And given that it has such a beneficial impact on wellbeing, it makes sense for agencies to try and implement this where they can. And we also asked people about what would they like their workplace to do to support their mental well-being, and we had a lot of open-end responses. A lot of it focused around these ideas that are encompassed here in these two quotes. So this is really saying, an open and accepting atmosphere. So here it is again, people talking, they just want to be open about this topic and create a safe space for them. But actually, this is a really nice idea that I thought was quite nice, is having actually discussions focused on mental health in smaller groups within the organisation. So it just becomes normal to talk about, and teams facilitating those and agencies facilitating those. And then also here, someone talking about the senior team being more open about talking about it. You see people higher up, it does need to come from leadership. And this is the thing, it can come bottom up, and the two approaches come bottom up and top down with this. But I think both of them together are so powerful when you really get your senior leaders on board around mental health and how important it is to be talking about this topic and acting on this topic, and actually openly discussing things such as stress and workplace stress. Oh, actually, my director feels this way too, is really powerful. And then the final recommendation is all around reevaluating working practices. So as we know, and many of us have been working from home due to the pandemic, and actually before COVID, only 28% of us were working from home. That's now got up to 99%. So we've needed to adapt and work from home and remote working. And that's had some challenges and it's had some benefits. Some of the positive effects of it being, not having to commute, get on a really crammed train in the morning, for 62% has been a real benefit to their mental health. People are also feeling more relaxed when they're working from home. And some people are saying also they have a better work-life balance as well. But I think there's also, this blending of work and home life. It has so many challenges too. And those are kind of summed up on this next slide. So we see, 57% saying that actually they're working longer hours. So whilst half of people say I've got a better work-life balance, half of people are going, well, no, I haven't. I'm actually working for longer. People struggling to get outside during the day. People finding it hard to kind of draw those boundaries as well between work and rest. But I think also this feeling of being isolated, this person on the right-hand side here, the second quote, saying they live alone. So they've really lost out on all the social aspects that they used to get from work. And then finally, despite those challenges, you would look at all those challenges and think, God, people won't want to work from home. Actually, no, lots of people do. 96% of people want to work from home after COVID to some extent. So whether that's, less than a day a week or more than that, the majority, it's about 65% say that they would like to work from home a few days a week. So people really want this hybrid approach, the real appetite for it with people. They want to reap the benefits. And so this is my last slide, and just before I wrap up and hand it over to Stephanie, and you've all got to remember this is like a journey we're all on. People are at different steps in that journey with supporting employee wellbeing and employee mental health. some people are far down the road with it, some people are just starting out, but I think what's really at the heart of it is thinking about that there's a person behind, you know, your employee, and behind each person, you know, they have their own challenges, and trying to take a personalized approach wherever we can within wellbeing is just going to be better for everybody. So where that's possible, I think that's really important. So I hope that's been interesting. We will be releasing the results for this tomorrow, the full report, which goes into a lot more depth on each of these recommendations and lots more stats that sit behind these. So do have a look out for it and take a full read. But I'm going to hand over to Stephanie, who's going to run you through the code from Brilliant Creative Minds, and think about more about how we can kind of action some of these insights and address these issues.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steph, and I got a brilliant introduction from Graham in the first place. So thank you, Graham, for that. And as you've probably gathered, I'm nearly the oldest person in the industry. So hopefully that brings with it a level of experience. So I want to talk to you today about Brilliant Creative Minds, which is a mental health and wellbeing campaign to protect and nurture our industry's mental health and well-being. And the reason for that is we have to ensure that people's minds are happy and healthy, so that we can continue to produce the kind of brilliant creative work that makes our industry so valuable to the UK. And we'll come on to a little bit more about that in a second. So the campaign aims to change the bad working practices that harm people's ability to be creative, whichever discipline they work in. So whether you're a researcher or a comms planner, a strategist, a suit, or a media buyer, our industry demands that everyone thinks creatively and is capable of developing new and innovative ideas. So if we just move on a second, Terry. So I think the really interesting thing about this campaign, and why the industry as a whole have come on board to support it, is that it is unique in that it's recognizing that it's only by bringing the three interdependent sectors to work together as one that we can meet our aim. So when I say the three sectors, Brilliant Creative Minds believes that whilst agencies could potentially change their behaviour, that will not impact in isolation on the mental health and well-being of the people who work in the industry. We need procurement and clients to come on board as well in that process. And I think it's only together and looking at our own behaviours and what we can change for everyone's well-being that we can make a difference. Now, what is gratifying about BCM is that there are some fantastic and very powerful organisations in the Brilliant Creative Minds partnership. So it was founded and is funded by my organisation, Social and Local, but much more important than that are the partners who bring the weight to this campaign. The Alliance, to whom I'm eternally grateful for listening to me and coming on board, the Advertising Association, the IPA, NABS, and of course ISBAR. But what is really important about this is that Crown Commercial is on board. Now, you may know that the UK government are the biggest spender in the advertising industry in the UK. And looking quickly at my notes, I see that last year, 2020, they spent £124 million on direct advertising. So I felt from the beginning, if we were going to make this work, that we needed to entice the biggest spender to come on board through their procurement unit and as clients to support this initiative and to adhere to the process that we're going to ask of people in changing their behaviours. Thank you, Terry. let's have a quick look at what behaviours are compromising creativity. I expect you will, very quickly your eye will move to elements of these circles, and you will recognise some of the problems that your teams suffer from. So clearly there is quite a lot that agencies need to think about themselves in terms of behaviour change. And of course, Sophie has raised some of those already. So if we go to the bottom of the yellow bubble, I think there's been and remains huge fear that, raising a problem with one's personal health and well-being may in fact, bring with it a fear of being berated or losing your job or not fitting in or being thought to be a bit of a weakling. But if we look also at the behaviours from procurement and clients that are driving poor mental health and well-being, we can see there a whole load of reasons that are impacting as the collective on those people that are suffering. It was very interesting. I was presenting to the Chartered Institute of Procurement a couple of weeks ago. It was one of my less successful presentations because one of their members said in that meeting to me, well, why should we bother about agency mental health? Because agencies thrive on stress. To which I replied, well, yes, of course, we need good stress as an industry, because that's what makes us particularly imaginative and ideas driven. But there is a very big difference between good stress, which we need in order to be able to perform, and negative stress. So a lot of the research that we did over 12 months raised the specific issues that are listed on this slide in terms of the big causes of poor stress. Thank you, Terry. So I think the other thing is, why is this so important? Sophie has obviously talked at length about the impact on people, and some of that is repeated here. And there's another stat here, 64% of media and ad agency employees have considered leaving the industry in the last 12 months. That is not good for an industry. So there's a good stat there. Our industry has a 30% churn rate compared with a 10% UK average. And 94% of people in the industry believe that well-being is essential for their successful career, and that more empathetic leadership is needed. And all of us as leaders in agencies or senior people need to consider that. However, if we look at, we can talk at length between ourselves, in my view, about well-being, and we can change our behaviours, but it is absolutely critical that we bring procurement and clients on board, because unless we do, we won't be able to get the changes of our mental health and well-being that we're seeking. So what sorts of arguments do we have for those sectors? Well, I think just a couple up here and much more on our website, but the UK's creative industries contributed over 111 billion to the UK economy in 2018, and 90% of MPs agree that creative industries are vitally important to perceptions of UK PLC, and that has been amplified, obviously, by Brexit. The second thing it's really important that business leaders understand is that a business that invests in creativity is much more likely to increase productivity and to be competitive. So there are very, very good business reasons why we need to look after the mental health and well-being of the people who are generating those ideas for us. So if we move on, Terry, and I'm being brief today, we need to say, what are we going to do about this? And our answer to the problem has been to develop alongside the Alliance and our other partners, the Brilliant Creative Minds Code of Practice, which is guided entirely by the intelligence and insight that we gleaned over 12 months. And I would say has been, reinforced by what Sophie said today. And the code is designed to be applied to clients, to agencies and procurement to eradicate those behaviours. So the tenets of that code apply across those sort of three, that triangular set of relationships. So it's now, what is really important again is, you will have seen lots of codes out there and they're all very nice, but the important thing is that people need to subscribe to that code. And I think this is where the magic of Crown Commercial being on board has become really important, because Crown Commercial, with their 134 million spend, which may even be more in 2021, have integrated this code across their client base. So that is the whole of the government sector and great slugs of the public sector too, and is currently in the process of training clients in terms of how to recognise the problems that they themselves are driving to impact on mental health and well-being in agency life. And the expectation of BCM, which only launched 3 weeks ago, is that we will be selling it in to private sector clients as well, and hopefully getting them to adopt it. So thanks, Terry, if we just whiz on from there. So, I think the message that I've tried to share with you today is that fostering brilliant creative minds means working together. We know what the problems are, but that the Marcoms industry is collaborative and no one player has full control. Now, I skipped rather quickly over the Code of Practice, which you've seen and which is available again on the Brilliant Creative Minds website, and you can look at in more detail. But I thought to finish today, I would pick up on what the tenets of that code mean in terms of action. Terry, would you mind pressing the next slide forward? So if you remember, there were 8 tenets to the code. You had to look at them very quickly. I've repeated most of them here. So the first one is create time for creativity. Interestingly, going back, Albert Einstein recognized how important it is to foster individuality, for only the individual can produce new ideas. And that again means that we have to look after that individual's mental health and well-being. So when we say create time for creativity, we need to recognize that it is the one thing that sets our business apart. And no other industry on the planet can solve multi-million-pound client problems with a simple idea. Really important. We need to nurture it. We need to embrace creative risk as a consequence of originality. We need to place trust in our individual sector experience. We want great work, and creativity can only really thrive when the people that are involved in creation are feeling confident and respected for their contribution. Clients and procurement need to pitch with integrity. They need to be fully mindful of the time, financial and emotional impact of delivering a creative tender, which calls for expert management of that pitch process, which needs to be respected by internal leadership as much as it does from client and procurement leadership. If we move on, Terry, we need to stop unintended or unethical consequences arising from our lack of care for people. And or indeed, as far as often procurement or clients are concerned, a lack of knowledge of the creative industry. It's a complex relationship, and it needs complex relationship management to make sure it works. And we need to ask no more of our people than we or the client intend to pay for. I'm sure that will resonate quite strongly with you. And when we talk about things like burnout, this comes very much to the fore, because we've all experienced tenders or long hours culture that have been simply unacceptable and are totally damaging to the health. And you know, we also know that commissioners of work expect a lot more than their budgets can stretch to often, and that it is the poor person at the end of the instruction that bears the brunt of that. The other thing, we need to have brave conversations very openly. We need to be very clear, and we need to be free of misunderstanding and misinterpretation, because those feelings of being misunderstood or misinterpreted can be overwhelming and drive anxiety, low mood, irritability, and a withdrawal, as some of us will know. Finally, on the last side, and I think this is maybe even the most important, everyone in those three circles needs to take a personal interest in the fellow human beings they are working with. Treat them as people, be empathetic and supportive, and understand that it is vital, if they are going to deliver good work, that we recognise who they are and put an individual's unique needs at the forefront. So if I go to my last slide, Terry, let's make it brilliant. What can you do? For those of you who are listening, I am asking you personally to go onto the website. There's a barcode there to sign up to the code today. But before you do, there's much more detail on there about how to activate the code. I've just touched upon it in what I've presented. I want you to believe in the tenets of that code, and believe in and subscribe to the actions that it requires for us to sign up. By agency world signing up to it, we will leave very little and very few gaps open for clients and procurement to do so. So thank you for listening to me today. And I believe I'm handing over to Ruth.
Right, thank you. There's a lot in there, both from Sophie and Steph. So thank you very much for all of those brilliant presentations. Has anyone, in terms of kicking off, as Graham said, it'd be great if people sort of turn on their cameras, and if you've got any questions, either put them into the chat or raise a hand or ask away. So I mean, firstly, I thought Sophie, it was quite interesting the fact that some of the stress, some of the stats that you raise, that there's a difference between people saying that workload is too intense, but actually client demand. So it's obviously the process in place within agencies that often make it worse, not the clients. So the clients might not actually be the ones pushing the teams, because often agencies will claim it's the client's unfair demands, but actually it often seems as if it's the practice in place within the agencies that are causing a lot of the problems.
Yeah, I think it's a hard balancing act, isn't it, with, you know, capacity and workload, and I think particularly working from a smaller agency as well, it's something we've come up against as a challenge, and a lot of the time I think it's also having some sort of process in place that is like, okay, if you do have too much work on, who do you speak to, what do you do, and is there enough people to hand off work to people, or do you have to come to a point where actually you're having to say to a client, we can't deliver to your unrealistic deadline because we don't have people to work on it right now. It's a really tough one. It comes up when we do these panels. I've done a couple of these with different industries every year across different sectors. So I would love people's thoughts on that as well.
I think we've also got a question from Irene, which is what process can agencies put in place to ensure individuals can raise issues around mental health? I mean, I can answer that in terms of what we do at Circle, which is, I mean, it's never perfect, but you need to make sure. I think the recent Brewdog situation highlighted the fact that what was fascinating about his response was actually, surprisingly for a business that size, they didn't seem to have any process in place at all in terms of HR, you know, fundamental things you'd expect a large organization to have. So, you know, things like, you know, line management one-to-ones, opportunities for people to raise issues, whether that's anonymously or not. For example, we have a happiness portal where people can put in how they're feeling each week, and they can also put in, they can talk about the issues that they're having either anonymously if they don't want to raise it, or if they do. We also have a buddy system to make sure that people can not necessarily talk to their line manager, but also have somebody that they can talk to on a personal level. We've also got mental health first aiders, and mental health and wellbeing plans as well for individuals to put in place. So there's lots of other things that you can do. I'm not sure if Stephanie, if you obviously with the code, there's probably lots of other things that you can suggest. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yes, that's better. Sorry to keep you waiting, Ruth. Yes, I think there are significant pointers within the code of practice, and well, in terms of the activation of the code of practice, the notes of which are on the website. But I think there is a difference in that this is about behavioural change, Ruth. I think it requires people like us, and I can speak very personally, that had we been having this conversation 20 years ago, probably even 15, I might have been raising my eyebrows because, you know, I was a madman for many, many years with all that kind of body language and all the sentiment that has gone with that. But I have kept an open mind, and I have listened and learned, seen some shocking things happen, and I have changed my behaviour. And certainly in the last 12 to 15 years, the businesses that I've led, I have become so much more conscious of actually the productivity and the brilliance that comes out of looking after people. So, you know, that is really important.
There's another question here from Alexa saying, the code sounds great, and we've already discussed how we can activate it internally. Is there any advice you can have on how to encourage clients to buy into this? Stephanie, you can answer that one.
Well, that is my next task. My next task is, as I said, we've only just launched the code. We launched it 3 weeks ago. And if you go on the website, again, you will see the number of agencies that have already signed up to it. So there are some big names on there who have signed up to it, as well as smaller, medium-sized independent agencies. I obviously have Crown Commercial signed up, and that embraces the whole of government spenders. My next job over the next 6 months is to go out and to talk to clients about this and to get them to sign up. So at the moment, I'm one of one. I would very much like the support of anybody who's signing up to the code to be able to share in their credentials presentations what they're doing with this. And it's our intention by September to have brought on board, you know, some senior clients. I'm doing that by way of presentations to the procurement unit within the Advertising Association. So you'll know that the Advertising Association represents advertisers. So I am doing a big session with the procurement team, who are all clients within there. I'm doing the same within the ISBAR team, and my job now over the next 12 months, until I completely fall over, is to sell it into clients and to leave this business in a much better shape than it is today.
Great. Are there any other questions from the floor?
I'll just go back to the previous question as well. So on what processes can agencies put in place? I also think it's worth adding that I think from the very beginning, even when you're going through like the recruitment process, that we should embed the fact that we normalise mental health and well-being right at the beginning. So making sure that people know that they're coming into an organisation and there's no judgment, you know, you can talk about anything and we'll accept it, is really important, because I think until we start literally normalising it to the point where you're having a conversation and you just weave mental health into it, nothing's really going to change. So I think that those are, yeah, one of the big points. But I also think getting people to feedback, getting your employees to tell them what they want, because I think people are more likely to get involved with initiatives if they've had an impact getting it up and running, because I then feel like they're part of it. So those are the two things that I think would really help just generally. Yeah.
I think building on your point, Alex, about like at the recruitment stage and when you onboard people, what we've really recently started doing is we do like a mental well-being at Opinium session. I sit down with our new joiners for 15 minutes. We have a really informal chat about why we feel it's important, you know, what things we're doing and the things that they can access. And I've had great feedback about that. So I would heavily encourage people giving that a go, because I've had brilliant feedback of people like, I didn't realise like somewhere would do all of this. Like, so it's been really great. And I think it does start to normalise it, and you're talking about it. Other thing we've done, which it's been actually kind of facilitated by the lockdown, because we obviously haven't all been like in the office talking like you normally would. So we're like, oh, we should put in like little coffee breaks for people. And it was Time to Talk Day back in February. And we basically did little coffee chats between about 3 people. And we sent a mail around to people like, just have a chat about how you are. Often people ask you how you are, you go, yeah, I'm right. And often you're not all right, or sometimes you're not all right, but you just go, yeah, I'm fine. And just to have a conversation about what's going on with you and how are things going. And people really opened up in those, and it was just really great to see. It's something we hadn't tried before the lockdown, and I think it's been facilitated by being able to do it virtually. People have felt a lot more comfortable. So hopefully something we carry on as we go back into a physical office.
Sorry.
I would also say, actually, just amplifying my previous point, if anybody in the room in the event today feels that they could bring together a small group of clients for a presentation, I would be very, very happy to come along and talk to them and just share these findings and amplify within that what the benefits to business and to clients are, because they need to understand there is a significant benefit from changing behaviour in terms of their business performance.
I think also normalising the sort of the regular check-ins. So, for example, we have personal scores during meetings. So, senior, you know, and that can be with team meetings. So, at the beginning of the meeting, everyone gives their personal score 1 to 10. 1 being terrible, 10 being fabulous, and it's a really good way of keeping a check on people, kind of up and down, and whether they're having a really crappy week or their crappy month or whatever. But it also you don't have to explain why you've got that score and why you're a 2, but it also allows people to be kind of caring and supportive of you if they know that you're having a 2 week, or you know, and some people are having an 8 or a 9, which is wonderful. But it's those kind of small techniques to make sure that it's not just about the work. And I think particularly when we're on Zoom and we're not, often you don't get those informal chats, Sophie, as you say, in terms of, if you're in the office you can pretty much tell if someone's not great, but when you're zooming in, often you're missing all those cues. So that those kinds of smaller things can often really help.
I do think that sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Just as people, we might think we need to get the HR team involved to run something, but I think the small conversations where you just say, this isn't a topic we're going to talk about, like let's talk about burnout. If you want to talk about it, come along, we'll have half an hour and then you can go off. And I like the idea of bringing things in. I think that rating system is so good. I definitely want to test that at the ground.
Have you seen, and obviously, Alex, you run the Wellbeing group at the Alliance. Have you seen any other sort of best practices within Alliance agencies that we can all steal?
Oh dear. The interesting thing about that is that at the end of every Wellbeing session, someone always says, oh, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I think we're all at different stages. And I think the key thing is that we are all at different stages. And it's not about agency versus agency. It's that in each agency, we've got people that are completely different. Every agency is always going to be slightly different in terms of their processes. But definitely open conversations is something key. Actually, one really good point the other day is if you do surveys, which, I mean, I feel like every agency is doing surveys at the moment, every agency body's doing surveys, but also sharing those results back. Because a lot of the time I think that we can do these activities, but actually not then communicate them back with employees. And they think, what was the point? Why do you do that if nothing's going to happen? And I think even if you're doing small things in the background that might not seem like a big deal, they probably are. And somebody will recognize that. But I also think that sometimes we think we're not doing enough, but we're not always going to hit everyone. We want to get 99% of employees, and we probably get.
Oh, you're back.
You're back.
I knew that would happen. I was like, at some point, my internet is just going to drop.
Sophie, I was interested about the difference between UK workers and Marcoms workers. What do you think? Why the reason? I mean, we're, no offence to everyone, but we're not brain surgeons. We're not saving children. Why are our jobs more stressful than others?
I mean, you've got to think. So the UK workers is a nationally representative UK workplace. So you have got like anyone in there from, I don't know, you're a construction worker or gardener to someone who also works in an office. And I think what we see is actually office workers overall have very similar scores to Marcoms. I do think it's also the direct client pressure is one of those things which you have somewhat of a buffer from, I think, in other industries. And there are probably other challenges as well. Coming from someone who hasn't worked in many other industries, I have worked in healthcare, which is a totally different kettle of fish, dealing with patients rather than clients. But, I think, some of it's interesting. And I think where this gets really interesting is when we start looking at changes over time. So I hope if we run this next year, which would be great, we can then start looking at where are we improving, and seeing actual change, and what are the things we still need to work on. So I think that would be great.
And I think that's also, Graham will want me to point this out, but we have our quarterly people pulse, which for the alliance agencies, which allows us to check in on our agency people each quarter. And if your team's input into that, you then get a report based on how your teams are generally, which is really useful to have that quarter by quarter. So I think the next one's going out in mid-July, isn't it, Graham?
That's correct. Yeah, mid-July we're going to launch. It'll be our 4th people pulse, so we are tracking how people are doing and how wellness scores are hopefully improving over time as we come out of lockdown and life gets back to normal.
Yeah,
or more normal.
Yeah. So the results of this research is going out externally tomorrow and shared around alliance agencies, so you'll be able to see the detail of that. And I'd encourage everyone to have a read of it, but also to download the code and then talk, if you have a wellbeing team or within your businesses, to talk about the kind of practical things that you can implement, because there's some really useful steps. And obviously, if you're part of the wellbeing group for the alliance, sharing those kind of things that you can do to improve your teams. It's obviously, we're in a totally different world now, so every little helps, and sort of sharing best practice and how we're all coping in this new world. I'm not going to say new normal, but new world is we're all in the same boat. We're not in the same boat, we're in the same storm, as they say, but not in the same boat, which I think is a lovely analogy. So does anyone else have any other questions?
It's not a question, but I was going for the sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say that we do have the quarterly wellbeing groups, but I was thinking the other day that what it might be good is for us to start running some more informal just catch-ups on certain topics throughout the year, because I do think well-being isn't something we should talk about every 3 months. It's maybe something we should talk about daily. So if there are topics, perhaps something that anyone here that if you're interested, we could just pick a topic, like one thing from the research, and maybe talk about that every month for the next year. Yeah, let me know what you think about that.
Okay, go on, Adam, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of, because I missed the opportunity to share, I suppose, best practice. We're a relatively small agency with 5 individuals, but our thing is music is at the center, and it's practically the DNA of our agency, right? And we use music for mental health and well-being. And so we curate this playlist that we share with our clients, you know, Boogie Mondays and Party Up Fridays and so on and so forth. And right now we have what we have a Pride playlist for June, and we every day we post our favorite artists of the day, and that's a collective effort from the entire team. And it really sort of stems from the DNA of the agency and how we were founded in terms of doing a lot of music marketing and so on and so forth, and really sort of understood how music, I think for me personally, has saved me throughout lockdown, to be honest. Blasting songs that I've loved listening to when I was a kid, and songs that sort of bring back memories and so on and so forth, and made me feel good about the work that I do, and made me feel good in terms of interaction with the team. And so we've brought that as a center at the absolutely sort of center to what we do. And every week, the team tends to suggest new artists to listen to, and so on and so forth. So we're more than happy to share that with you guys. We believe that music is a fantastic tool to help with one's mental health and also creativity. Yeah, so we would love to share that with you.
That's great, and I imagine it makes you feel bonded if you're all listening to the same things.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And then we have sort of karaoke thing going on, right? And some of us get the words mixed up.
That sounds dangerous. Not sure about that.
But yeah, that's our little best practice, and it's something that we bring and we share with clients as well, and I absolutely love that.
Great, thank you. That's great tips. Steph, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that is absolutely great as well. But I think there was a question before about why it is that our industry is so sensitive. And I've always felt that I think it is about the fact that our industry is right at the forefront of creativity. And that means that it will attract certain sorts of people. When I entered the industry at 20 years old as a gopher in an Omnicom agency, making tea for everyone in the boardroom, I realized I'd arrived home. It was just so wonderful to be amongst people who were like me, a little bit off the wall and slightly different from the other sorts of people I knew. And I think our industry attracts and thrives on people who are creative, but are going to be equally, you know, much more anxious about delivering an amazing piece of work, because that's why we're in it. And that makes us, and perhaps the music industry, for example, so sensitive to the mental health and well-being problems that we suffer.
Well, there's a question here from Irene about the first signs of burnout. Steph, do you want to take that?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I'm qualified to know that, because although our partnership is driving the campaign for behaviour change, we're not experts in psychology, and there very soon will be, and there are already on the website, there is signposting to people who can answer those questions for you. I suspect it's pretty common sense. You know, you can see it in people's faces. My team will know when I've been heading for a particularly stressful patch. It'll be the tone of my voice. It'll be the look on my face. It'll perhaps be a drop in the quality of my work. But I'm not an expert on that. And I would suggest there are others who are much better able to answer it.
I would say that, to be honest, you've said all the things that I think if you Googled it would come up, like finding elements of the role that you might normally find quite easily. Things just annoy you a bit more, or people just annoy you a bit more, but then like physically, emotionally, like reduced performance, the standard things. But it's an interesting question, because we all have all read about people who might have had huge issues with their mental health, and no one knew about it until something monumental happened. And I think that's the same with burnout. But I think when it comes to like my team, I would rather be friends with them so that I can like see those little changes that you can really only pick up on when you know someone really well. We do spend so much time together that I think when it comes to things like this, you might not see them because it's a very gradual change. So it's just having to be, I think, really in tune and be friends with people in your team so you're able to pick up on them. And also just encouraging people to tell you. That's the most important thing. Just you being honest with them and then them being honest with you.
Yeah, I think as well, if you've got that open dialogue with people, then they're more likely to actually come up in conversation, or, you know, ask someone. If someone says they're fine and you're not sure, ask them again, because often people will be like, oh, well, actually, this is going on with me. But I think one of the really interesting things I would point people towards as a resource, Mind website is amazing. They also have a lot specifically on workplace mental health. And they have these things called I might get the name wrong, workplace action plans. So it's something that you might want to, you know, fill out with your line manager, or, you know, a buddy if you've got that sort of system in place. Basically telling them, what does it look like for you if you're struggling? Like, what would it look like? Like, if they don't, because, like, you know, it's basically what you're saying, Alex, but almost formalizing that if you're not friends in the workplace with, you know, your manager, and you're not really close, or particularly in times when, like this, we're not so close to people, you can't quite see everything that's going on with them. So it would be like, you know, for me personally, if I'm struggling, I'm quite like a chatty person. I'm quite like, oh yeah, if I'm struggling, I will probably make some excuse that my internet's bad and not put my video on. So it's like stuff like that you could be like, okay, like, then you make a further check-in with somebody and be like, are you sure you're okay? Do you want to chat? And like, some of the time people won't want to talk to someone at work. And I think that's when it's really important to be able to signpost to places outside of work as well.
I think that's really important to have those plans, but also, as you say, having other alternatives. Like, you know, a lot of us will have agency helplines, or sort of external. We have an external guide that we use in terms of sort of other resilience training and things like that. We can take that person and point them in their direction. It doesn't have to be someone within work, but a mental health work action plan is a really good idea. Is there any other questions before we wrap up? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for your engagement. I know it's slightly late and everyone wants to go and have a lie down.
A glass of wine and some music.
Listen to some great music. I think that's a fantastic tip. But thank you, everyone. Thank you to Alex, Steph, Sophie, for all your amazing hard work. And we'll obviously share that research, and we'll look forward to your feedback and the next Wellbeing team meeting. So thank you, everybody.